Speaking of Thursday at 12:30, hi! I'm pretty sure we don't bite, so if you want to scoot forward from the back, this might be a more intimate, interesting experience. I'm Rachel, I'm your moderator for the panel, It's Not My Job to Teach You. The description here is people who are part of marginalized communities are often asked to teach others the basics of diversity and inclusiveness. How do we help people understand that it's not any individual's obligation? Where and how should they learn? We have had some lively discussion pre-con, and we are happy to present to you today. So we'll just go down the line, introduce ourselves, your name, your pronouns, marginalized identities you hold if you're comfortable sharing.
All right.
I'll start.
No, you start.
Yeah. I'm Rachel. I am a bisexual Jewish disabled woman, and and she, her are my pronouns.
I didn't check to see if my microphone works.
It does.
Okay, good.
Just eat it.
I'm loud though. So
Eat it.
No, I don't want to eat it. Okay. Anyone can hear me anyways. Okay. So my name is Sean. I go by he, him, but I have been thinking that mistress would be a really great, just pronoun to just have. Just in the back pocket there. Regular little gay guy, so nothing exciting here. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Lathan, he, him pronouns. I'm black, I'm not straight. I think some area in the vastness of queerness would be where I sit. I'll have to figure that out at some particular point, but poly, am generally weird in just how I exist in the world, so yeah. Let's go with that.
And queer is like a sphere instead of a spectrum. Yeah.
I'm Amanda. My pronouns are she, they. I am a bisexual woman. I'm also poly. That's me.
Hi everyone, I am Morgan, she, her pronouns. I am a black bisexual, somewhere on the aromantic spectrum, woman born and raised in the Twin Cities.
So we are here to talk about how we shouldn't have to educate you, which, fun.
We'll get you on that.
You've got an hour. So our first question of the day is, when someone approaches you looking to be educated, who are these people? And especially, are they asking in good faith? And how can you tell? So just kind of popcorn. If folks aren't speaking up, I'll let you know.
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah. So who is looking to be educated when people ask you to teach them about your marginalized identity? And are they asking in good faith? And how can you tell?
I think the big part is how people frame the question, or specifically what they're asking. So I used to work for the HRC canvassing, and so when people ask you questions, you could tell people are going to tell you what their biases are in their questions most of the time. So people would ask oh, what's happening with the trans community, or I've heard things on the news, what's that all about? Or you'd hear if someone that's opposed to horrible question where they're what about children mutilating their bodies? Those questions are very different, coming from different places. So I think you can kind of tell, given what people are, how they're wording things, or what they're kind of trying to lead you to answer in a way.
Well, a couple of things which I find kind of straightforward are, one, and this actually comes a lot with talking with my mom about polyamory, is asking is it all right if I ask you this? Simply having the immediate, I understand this is I don't want to burden you with questions, I'm just really curious, is one thing. A certain level of showing an understanding that I know this is probably a lot and there's a lot going on, but I'm just generally kind of curious and kind of want to understand. And then usually how open the question is, where it's just what is it how do you manage time, or how does this particular how does this work exactly, as opposed to something where it's just a very pointed, well, how come you're always corrupting so and so, or doing things where there's a very clear assumption of how something works, as opposed to just I really don't know, and I was wondering if you have time to kind of just make this a bit more clear. It's kind of one of the ways that I kind of see the differences in those types of questions.
Yeah, so my experience is in a lot of having men ask me to teach them about feminism. Yeah, exactly. So the open-endedness, absolutely, that's a good sign that they actually want to know something. When they're like asking for citations about your lived experience, that's a waste of time. They're not listening to you, they don't care. They're not there to be educated, they're there to waste your time and make you feel like shit. So I just try to return the favor then.
Yeah. In my experience, I think it really depends on where we're at and what the situation is. I've had a lot of people asking about my experiences, like coworkers at work, and that's somewhere in particular where it's like, I am not my authentic self in this space, and anything I could say is going to be heavily filtered, and then it's not worth my emotional labor to be code switching and figuring out what is the appropriate way in the workspace. And then it's like coworkers who they don't ask you about yourself, so it's very much like and I used to work in a public library, so it's kind of, you're asking me in a way that's kind of like librarian-esque, but you're not asking me as a person, and I think that's two very different things. Especially like kind of depending on what questions they are asking, because it's like, okay, do you want me to find a book for you? Or are you asking me as a person about my opinions and not expecting me to be answering for the entire Black community? Like, come on, people.
Like you look like king of the Black people. Could you please tell us?
Exactly.
Could you please tell us how this works?
Yeah.
You guys talk about that at the meetings, right?
How do you know about the meetings?
Lathan, I like that you brought up when your mom asks, hey, can I ask you a question? Like getting the consent to ask for that emotional labor in the first place makes it feel like it's worthwhile to...
That makes it all the difference in the world. But you have to be mindful, like sometimes people will approach you like, oh, can I ask you a question? And they don't expect you to say no. They don't expect you to be like, hey, you know what? I don't have the emotional capacity for that right now. Ask me in a couple of days, or like, let me worry about this thing first and I'll get back to you. But then there's and certain people do have kind of a certain entitlement. And I've seen this a lot with white people, with people of color, but also cis people with trans people. And it's like, yo, this is actually really personal and I don't want to talk about it. And they're like, well, I'm just asking a question. How am I supposed to learn if no one teaches me? Which is kind of the purpose of this panel. It's like, it's not our job to teach you. So like, I love that consent and asking first, but like expect a no sometimes. Like,
Consent has to be freely given.
yes.
This discussion is part of our next question of when do you decide to provide that education yourself as opposed to just giving them resources or flat out refusing, and how can you set healthy boundaries so that people don't force you to educate them?
So I like this particular question because it gets a lot into, I guess, my own kind of journey in terms of educating people, and this mostly in terms of very epic battles on the internet.
Yeah.
I remember very early on where it was like the hackers movie. Someone would say something really ignorant on a social media, and it's like I got the Google pulled up. I am pulling out responses, and it was honestly there was a little bit for a while where it was really fun poking the holes in all of their really dumb logic, and later on kind of making a bit of a spectacle of the ignorance in that particular sense. And if you have the energy and you're bored, that's something you want to spend a chunk of your day doing, there is a certain level of just like when someone says something that is very wrong, and simply providing even just like, actually, that's not how that works at all. And then other people, even if you're not convincing that person, but when other people who look at the comments and kind of see, oh, I see what the flaws in this logic are, And if you can do it while being really nice and sounding polite about it, that's even like is a whole devious strategy to that and whatnot. But I feel like there is, like with physical battles, that kind of fight has a very short-term and limited amount of overall value. And there's like, at most sometimes if something's on something that I'm following, I'll maybe give a amount of correction, or I might point out that's not really how it works, and then just kind of move on from there. But I tend to find there's much more value in conversations where, one, I have the energy for it, and two, where the person is actually willing to listen. And I have had conversations with people who have very wrong opinions, but because they were literally because the information that they have was just faulty. Not being a bad person, not being really like intently attached, but from what the information that they already had was like, they drew this particular conclusion. And we had a pretty long discussion. It's like, oh, okay, no, I get that now. That makes more sense. And that to me was more valuable, where there's someone that you can actually have a conversation with and actually recognize that different experiences lead to like these different opinions, and you can't have a middle ground and have a reasonable civil conversation, as opposed to needing to like Google fact check them into 6 feet underground, which again, for like the dramatic fun of it, sure, but has, again, not necessarily the most effective long-term way to approach life.
Yeah, my approach is I'm happy to educate people on minority identities that are not my own. I have more spoons for that because it doesn't emotionally affect me to talk about racism, for example. And it's easier when it's someone who sees me as a peer, like when another white woman says something racist in front of me, it's much easier for me to be like, hey, did you know? Like, that's not a cool thing to say. Here's why it isn't a cool thing to say. Like, that doesn't take from me as much as someone saying, a man demanding that I educate him about feminism. So I try to keep that in mind. And when I'm commenting online instead of in physical spaces, I'm not trying to change the mind of the person that I'm talking to, because that's rarely going to happen, rarely. I'm trying to make sure that other people who are reading it, who are of that minority group, know that they have support, and it's not just this one person spewing hate. There are people out there that stand behind them.
I forgot I have to eat the microphone. So I'm like the worst person to ask about things, especially about like queer community. So if someone was like, hey, what's the gay rights movement? I'm like, oh good, let's start at the Hirschfeld Institute. We're gonna talk about third sex, and then we're gonna move to Stonewall. We're also going to be talking about the Hays Code. Like, I'm like, so here's the deal. You can ask a point question and I will get to it and I will give you a short answer. Otherwise, you're gonna fall down this well with me. So that gets really crazy. But I always feel like when we're talking about like dealing with people of different backgrounds and different minorities and things like that, I feel like making fun of myself and my own ignorance about things really helps break the ice with those sorts of things, and like really that can help open up more of a communication with other people, especially like people that you don't hold the same backgrounds with. Just understanding that you're not going to be the best at this, you don't have to deal with it, so it's okay to laugh at yourself and make sure that you're like open to the opportunity of growth.
I would say, sorry.
Yeah, so on the topic of boundaries specifically, like you're saying, you can go down this rabbit hole, but I don't necessarily have the energy to take people down the rabbit hole with me.
Yeah.
Like my parents were, I love my parents, they're white liberals. And they don't understand sometimes that some of the things that they are saying or planning are not necessarily respectful. So at the same time, like if my mom is digging her heels in when I'm telling her, no mom, you need to go do more research on this, you back off in part for the sake of the relationship and in part for your own mental health. Like there's the boundary. Like, yes, I'll push you on this, but if you're gonna make it hell for me, I don't have time for this.
I would say for me, primarily it's gonna be based off of tone, which is hard to judge in like online spaces, but if it's face-to-face and like just based on their tone, if it feels like they're genuine and actually asking, or if they just genuinely made a mistake, okay, yeah, let's normalize correcting people in a respectful manner. And if they're, you know, genuine online and just want to be like, hey, I don't know anything about this, can anyone kind of help me get started, that's great. I think another aspect of it that I've kind of put my foot down on in the last few years, especially since 2020, is how much work have they already put in. If they haven't put in any work or don't understand like the kind of fundamentals and foundations of all the isms and bigotry that people still deal with, then I am less inclined to engage in any sort of conversation. Like, I don't have the energy to explain the fundamentals. However, if it's something along the lines of, hey, you know what, I was watching this thing and this thing was said and, you know, I tried to look it up, but I'm kind of not following the concept. And if I know, then I'm like, oh, yeah, so let me try to break this down. If I have a resource, I'll pull the resource out of my back pocket. If I don't know, it's like, oh, hey, yeah, you can probably, like, I can make suggestions about, like, search terms they can use to kind of find more information, or be like, hey, you know what, let's look into that together so then we can have a further conversation on this. But if they've put in no work and kind of have that expectation of, I'm just gonna ask people on social media, then that's a serious problem, because you're not putting in the work and then you're just expecting us to teach you. Which is like, no, there are plenty of resources out there. Like, you have to do bare minimum research and then kind of build on that knowledge. So I'll kind of judge if it seems like a genuine ask and if they've clearly kind of been doing in the work. I know, like, it's a little easier when it's like your personal circle, less easier when it's just strangers online. But you can kind of tell, like, by the terms they use or the way they're speaking about it or writing about it, you can generally tell if, like, okay, yeah, you actually want to learn something here and you're not just, you know, trying to start drama for likes and clicks.
And something also, like, on the online aspect, sometimes someone says something, a clarification question of like, how do you mean this, or like, are you what exactly are you kind of going with here? Something that is mild, but kind of asking the person to clarify more what they are meaning or wanting in their statement or in their question can be an easy way to judge tone in that sense, because as the more you get them, the more you generally get people to talk, the more they kind of show who they are. And it's not too hard to have kind of, you know, a series of just little like test questions if you to kind of get a sense of, oh yeah, you were here to start actual trouble, or oh, you do want to know something, you just are necessarily bad at phrasing things in a certain way.
Yeah.
I can work with that kind of thing.
Yeah, something like, so the way you said that sounded like you meant it this way. Did you mean it that way? Kind of give them an out. Like, they're allowed to backtrack if they want to.
This seems to be leading into our next question. Calling in versus calling out. What's the difference and how does that apply here?
My personal definition of calling in versus calling out is that I can call in someone who is a peer, and I can call out people who have more power than me.
I like that one. I like that one a lot.
Call in my mom when she's hosting a Julau.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about here.
Okay.
I feel like for me, like, a call in is more of a conversation, like a let's sit down and break this down, and maybe going down a rabbit hole if that's what needs to happen. Otherwise, a call out would be just like, shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up, this is super racist, sit down, you don't know what you're talking about.
I kind of, I think like call outs tend to be much more like, that is what I'm responding to is more for the people who are observing the conversation, more for who are following the comments, as opposed to like something that's like, I think we need to have a more like in-person or private conversation about this, or like either messaging or like over a lunch. I also like, the reason this also makes me think a lot of Sailor Moon, because there are so many aspects where Sailor Moon is either trying to cleanse someone of negaverse energy and save them, or it's absolutely vaporizing a monster. Both with the intent of protecting love and justice and whatnot, but they are very different cases where one person is savable. Like, oh, I can help them and get them back to normal because they've been transformed by Queen Beryl. Nope, this is one of Queen Beryl's monster generals. They're an ass. They've been an ass for 1,000 years. I am sparkle bombing them into oblivion at the end of it.
I watched that show.
So much. I'll go on sale and rant later. But I do think there is a certain level of like social and emotional triage in terms of these types of things where you're really kind of gauging, can I actually relatively save this person from their own ignorance or from just a lot of bad social conditioning, or are they far gone? And my best bet here is to isolate how much damage they're doing for other people around them to see how much of an ass they are.
I would say that, like, just on the call-out part, because you guys are doing great, I'm just going to sit here and listen to you, so that's fine. But I think sometimes, especially as, like, a white person, you need to be careful about when you're doing call-outs, so you're not making the situation worse to make yourself feel better as an ally. Like, you can really, like, calling out someone is never necessarily going to make them be like, oh shit, I fucked up. Like, especially people really don't tend to do that. They'll probably dig their heels in harder.
Especially in public.
Yeah, people don't like being ashamed. And so it can always make the situation harder for people that you are trying to protect, quote unquote. So you have to be careful about that too. Like, I feel like just, you're a racist, go fuck yourself. Like, get out of here is like a really good response instead of like really just kind of hammering home at people, because that's not going to make the situation necessarily safer for any minority that you're working with or like trying to be an ally to. Like, it's part of an understanding when you're like not a part of a community to really not only that you step up for this community, but also that you're not like trying to make things worse by like making yourself bolster up like you're like the hero or the white knight, which is apropos.
Yeah, you have to take your ego out of it.
Yeah.
You're not the point. Yeah.
I also kind of feel like, and this is kind of like your own judgment, but sometimes in these situations it's kind of, oh, they just don't know what they don't know, or they're a grown-ass adult, they should know better. And so it's kind of like, oh, well, they don't know what they don't know, especially when it's kind of like localized issues. Then it's like, okay, let's call in and kind of explain this, why this is like specific to a culture or like an area, but other times it's like, you're just stupid. What do you mean this is what you did? You should know better. And then I tend to not give the benefit of the doubt in those situations, and especially kind of with social media as it is, TikTok in particular, where, you know, like rage bait and misinformation is what gets clicks and likes and the advertisers and such, but it's like you should know better, and I think that's kind of when I'm more call outy than call inny.
So we've identified who's talking to us, and we have identified whether or not we want to spend time on them. And in this particular case, we have decided that for whatever reason, we don't have capacity. So what are some techniques for keeping those folks engaged in this learning rather than going on the defensive or shutting down when we say no? And I can start. I took a decolonized nonviolent communication class a few years ago.
Oh.
And one of the practitioners' name is Minadji, and I highly recommend them. One of the big points that I took away from this class is keeping the conversation playful. Not necessarily light, but give it a sense of we are engaged in something fun right now. Like, hey, I may not have time right now, but this is a really cool thing that you're asking, and I want to make sure that you keep learning. Here's the thing that you need to go do to learn. Like, this was really good of you, good job.
Yeah.
What?
I was gonna say on top of that, if you just don't have like the time for it, just having some like backup recs I usually have, or like if people have questions about things, I don't like, again, gay crap. So like people are like, what's it like? I'm like, okay, do you have HBO? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, watch We're Here and sit in your living room and cry your eyes out, and I'll tell you what's going on, and you can look on from there. Like, and that's not necessarily like what everyone has, but like maybe just like sharing like a favorite YouTuber, or you know, like a TikTok that you follow, or like I'm old. Is it like Reddit or something, or Instagram? I don't know. TikToks? Do you guys do TikToks?
I think
don't
TikTok
do
is
it.
the big
TikTok? I don't know. It's like dance, and then you're like, hey, this is racism. Guys. But yeah, just having like a few of those things sometimes, I mean, you generally have them. Like, I watch a lot of gay stuff. So, yeah, okay, we're just gonna, a lot of gay stuff. And so like, I always have things that I was gonna clarify, and I'm like, no, we'll just leave it ambiguous. So just having those things there, like, it can be really helpful. And there's a lot of stuff out there that's really educational as well, that like, people might not know about, like the Queen or Paris is Burning. I guess if you like RuPaul, you know what Paris is Burning is, because she won't shut up about it. Yeah.
Well, a big thing for me that I actually have to be mindful of, at least more in terms of time rather than energy, is like I am a giant nerd that likes to talk about everything. So if someone asks me a question, like, and I am very much like, have you heard about Black people? Like, you do not understand. Like from like the science and history and this one like queer Black dude in Brazil who like beat up this one cop and took care of all these kids. And like, there's just so much stuff. Like come to me, I have so much to tell you. So I have to like, I don't always have the time for that though, because of like busy life. So typically, as someone, what I try to do, a couple things is narrow to a very specific question, like if they're like, if it's something general, like I try to give like if they have something like an experience they had, or how this kind of they felt about, like I saw someone said this and I'm not sure how to feel about this, and like addressing that specific thing. That's something that's much more narrow. And then I also like to like put pins in like to make time if I know I'll be more energetic, or I have more time to like have a longer conversation. And I also, in all the things, whenever someone's asking, I really try to emphasize that it is okay to not know things and to have opinions that are flawed, because the information that we started off with is not correct or some way. Like we are like, part of being human is that we will form faulty biases, we will form faulty constructs about the world. We have spent so many millennia building societies that were based off some kind of exploitation or misinformation, and it is not anyone's fault that we've grown up in a society that has taught us something wrong. And I really try to emphasize that it's okay to not know stuff and for it to be wrong about something. That does not make anyone a bad person. It is doubling down on being wrong for the sake of a very like flimsy sense of self-importance that's really the issue here. And I also, I feel like at this particular point, I have a fairly jovial and weird, humorous approach to all the horrible things that human beings have done throughout history, because it's either kind of laugh or sob in a fetal position kind of type of thing. So it's like so kind of very much is like, yeah, working in the fields all day, and you know what? Then realizing, wait a minute, machetes cut more than just sugar cane. Foreman, I like to have words. So I have a fairly dark. So I feel like a dark sense of humor can be very helpful in terms of kind of these topics and making them a little bit easier to kind of process and talk about. But those types of things, where it's just like, I try to be aware of time. I try to give, if I don't have time to get into something long, I try to give fairly focused answers, and I try to approach with a sense of just like, it's okay to not know things. And a little dark humor sometimes will liven things up enough to like talk about them and not feel horrible.
I like to go for emotional manipulation. It's very quick and effective because I can just say, you know, I feel passionately about this topic because I care about people. Like what we're talking about here it's all about people. So I put it that way and I say, you know, I love people and I care about people being happy and healthy and living the best lives that they can, just like you do, right? I was raised Catholic, so the guilt thing.
No, I hate people, Amanda.
Death to everyone now. No, first-degree murder. Legalize cannibalism.
I mean, just bring back dueling and we'll actually make a lot of this whole discussion much easier.
What was the question?
Setting boundaries.
That's right.
Yeah.
Typically,
Or sorry, the setting boundaries was earlier. This was keeping them engaged in their learning.
keeping them, yep, if I don't have enough energy for it, like at the time period, or if they're approaching me with a topic that I actually don't know about, usually I'll say, you know, let's loop back around with this. In the meantime, keep doing the work, so once we do loop back around to it, maybe you're informing me of things that I didn't know. So it's kind of like I'm not the teacher, we're teaching each other and we're learning from each other. And I don't have the capacity right now, but if you have the capacity, I'm gonna ask you to do the heavy lifting right now, so when we do come back together, then we're both still learning and both contributing to the conversation. Otherwise, if I just don't know, or just like, you know what, that's just not a conversation that I wanna have, period. Usually I'll try to get people to follow people with marginalized identities, not to ask them questions, but just to kind of like pick up on their perspective. Because typically if you're following them on some form of social media, you're gonna pick up on their values, what they think. They're gonna tell you about what they think about certain situations. And it's kind of like, it's more of a passive way, but at least you're kind of picking it up. And since most people are on social media all the time anyways, it's kind of like you're kind of fed that constantly. So then it's like they're still kind of participating in it in a little bit, it's just not me.
I'm
like
so old that when you said follow, I thought you meant like following people,
What?
like walking
Don't
behind them
follow
and
people
taking
like that,
notes. I was like, why would you do that? That's so weird. Like, okay, Jane Goodall, what's going on? And then like halfway through, I'm like, oh, she's on the internet.
On the internet, yes, yes.
I feel like
World Wide Web.
I feel like following marginalized folks on social media is also a really good way to hammer home that these are people.
Yes.
Because I remember one person distinctly that I followed because she was a different marginalized identity than me. And then she had a take on fatness that was awful. Just awful. And it's like, you're human.
Yeah, yep.
You have awful takes as well as interesting ones.
Exactly. And I'll also say, don't follow marginalized creators just because they talk about their marginalized identity. Follow Black creators who do nothing but dance or sing. Like, you know, like don't follow specifically so they can educate you. Follow them because they're really interesting creators. I know one creator that I follow, she's a content creator, she does cosplay and streams on Twitch, and she's constantly saying like, don't just like and follow my sorrows, and when people are being racist to me, follow my joy. You know, I get way more interactions with calling out racism than I do with a cosplay that I've worked hours on. You know, people need to be engaging with that, again, because they're human and they're out here doing their work, and they might have good takes, they might have bad takes, but you should be following like a diverse group of people just because they're really interesting.
Well, I gotta think that humans are not, it's gonna be a little soapbox, humans are not our skin color or our sex organs or orientation. Humans are the things that we love, the things that we like create and are passionate about. They're the places that we go and the conversations that we have. These are the things that like make us people and the things that we all have in common. And in that, in those narratives, in those interactions, like the tiny quirks of like of where we're from or who we love and how we see ourselves come through in all of that, but with far more context than just like those things by themselves. Those things are very much just like statistics on a census and not necessarily an entire person. And it's only until we can actually see people as a whole that we kind of understand where we're all coming from.
Speaking of Black creators who do cool things, I'm pretty sure Brianna Lawrence has a meet and greet this year.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Cosplayer, writer, cool person.
Yes.
So the last thing on our list is talking about resources. We have a page, double-sided small print with a QR code for if you want it digitally, of mostly stuff on white supremacy and racism. There's a couple of queer stuff in here, but I didn't have the energy to find anything on disability for it, or nobody else seems to either.
No.
So there's those resources, but what else? Like you mentioned, watching specific shows on just entertainment. What other types of resources do you frequently refer folks to?
I mean, it really depends for me on what people are looking for. If someone is looking for, like, I want to know more about the history of this, the actual attraction of this, or like the inner workings of these particular laws, then I'll recommend them to like this book or this particular ordinance or whatnot. But actually, when it comes to just like, I want to understand more of what kind of what's going on, I also default usually to like fiction books or TV shows. Like, it is difficult to like, here, take this one long multi-chapter book about, you know, the history of Chinese Americans and the building of the Transcontinental Railroad, or you can watch Warrior, and this will like explain all of the things. You'll get all of the, because the other thing is like, history is so complex, and being able to form things in a fairly simple 3-act narrative over a series of shows is a good way for people to like, because like watching something like Warrior or watching something like Lovecraft Country, you can really follow just like, oh yeah, this Irish cop who's trying to make a living, and his job is to police Chinatown, and there's this particular pressure from this mayor who wants to deal with these one businesses to be able to produce cheap steel. So they're using a lot of Chinese labor, which is cheaper, which is angering the Irish community. And just, you can see all these pieces kind of fitting together, where it goes from being just like a bunch of like bad white people being angry at these poor innocent minorities, and it's like there was a whole system of interaction. And being able to see everyone as very much human, and having so many moments where it's just like you just want, you know, the one Irish cop and the one like the one like Tom gangster be able to just get along and hug, and they have these moments, and it's like, and throughout the it's like, why do we have to racism? This is so tedious and frustrating. And very much it is its own kind of emotional manipulation, where it's just like, it's one thing, just like having knowledge is one thing, but really what really kind of matters is the emotional engagement that we have with people and the communities around us. And I find that TV and shows, like, you can pretty much mark various points in society where cultural opinions changed when certain things started showing up on television and showing up in movies, where like attitudes began to shift of just like, oh, I'm less bothered by this particular group because I see this group in my favorite show or whatnot. And as very cliche as it is, I think media has a really important power, and there's so many shows and so many movies out now that are really good at, that have been really good at expressing different cultural perspectives and narratives. And that gives, I think, gives us some really good tools of just like, I can't explain this entire experience to you, but if you watch this and come back and tell me what you think about this. And also that gives you at least, you know, at least 13 hours, depending on how long, like 20 hours, like a break before they come back to bother you again.
Yeah, along those lines, I just like convincing people to look for creators in whatever space they enjoy, whether it's books, movies, TV, podcasts. Look for creators that aren't, you know, that don't look like you, that don't have your experience. I think that that's a really good way to, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, to just get a sense of what it's like to be in someone else's shoes. Like, I haven't read a book written by a straight white man in years, and it's made my life so much better. And some people get really upset when you tell them that. That's another way to tell whether or not they actually want to be educated or not. And some people are like, wow, I've never thought about that. Oh, it turns out, like, all the media that I consume is by people who are just like me. Like, and that can open their mind a little bit to different experiences.
If I don't have, like, I typically lean towards books or online resources, articles and stuff like that. If I don't have something relevant on hand, I'll typically try for like a keyword so they can search it easier. You know, Google enshittification is such a hardship. So I'll typically give a couple of good keywords to help them search. So I'll usually try to keep up to date on some sort of glossary. It can be a little difficult with like changing slang and, you know, the internet, and you're communicating with people around the world, so some words change and stuff like that. So I try to keep up on some sort of keyword. So in a conversation, it's like, oh, you know what, it sounds like you're talking about this. I would say check in on this and see what resources you can find about this specific thing. I'm very much behind on all movies and TV shows currently. If I have a recommendation, I'll recommend it. But I typically go for a written text and kind of more academic side of things just because of my background. But I absolutely agree with that sort of the humanizing of marginalized communities in media. And it really touches on unconscious bias. And the stories that we pick up, especially in your formative years and in childhood, but also as an adult, that is going to really provide a lot of insight on how you think unconsciously, and you might have very conscious values like, yes, racism is bad, but the media that you consume is reinforcing white supremacy ideals and racist ideals that you're not realizing you're picking up on. So altering your media and what you are engaging in will help kind of combat that unconscious bias, and that is my word of the day, 2 words of the day for everybody who's unfamiliar with the term, unconscious or implicit bias.
I just agree with everything you've all said. I don't know. I just thought that would be funny. Which brings me to my next point. I feel like, especially nowadays, comedy is such a weird area where it's funny, but it's become more educational than you've ever had in the past. Like, it's not a joke, it's now like you're also teaching people, and I think that's one of the best resources for people right now, especially if you're new to it, coming into something that's funny, because that's going to bring your guards down, but it also can teach you, and you can watch things and see things made by creators made by minority groups for minority groups, because those jokes are very different than ones from other people. I'm constantly thinking of Black Lady Sketch Show up here. Ashley Nicole Black is fucking amazing. She's a great creator and a great artist and such a great writer, but like that's like a lot of what happens when you have comedies like this, even like In Living Color was doing it back in the day. I'm old. Is really bringing people together with that humorous aspect, but also not really making fun of people, just making fun of life and the situations that we have, because we're all human and life is stupid and ridiculous. So you can just laugh about it, and I feel like those are really good resources. And then when people are more like into it and they're like, what did this mean? Like, I didn't understand why that happened. Like, giving them those documentaries and movie recommendations, but sometimes you have to watch out because Stonewall is a bullshit movie. Just be careful.
Yeah, that's you bring up a good point where you say Stonewall's a bullshit movie, and like we're showing Hidden Figures in Cinema Rex this year, and like yes, Hidden Figures is great, and it's one of those shows that's like the black woman.
You tear down the bathroom sign and you solved racism.
Right, And it's so difficult because there are things that are really, really good, and then you have hiccups, like when Hidden Figures in particular was first announced, and I know various people have issues with that movie, but it was like, this is the first time in a very long time where there are 3 dark-skinned black women as a lead, and they're not maids, they're not servants, they're not slaves, you know, so that was like, so in that regard it's pivotal. However, it definitely misses the mark, and it's like, so much media is like that, where it's like, ooh, this could have been really great. The writer's room is not as dark or as gay as we would have liked it to be, so it's like, or like Hollywood, you know, they have to play it safe in some regards, which comes up with its all sorts of problems. So it is kind of like a, oh yeah, I watched all these movies, but you do have to see like who's in the writer's room, who's in the director's seat. How much say did, you know, marginalized actors have in kind of portraying their characters? Is it stereotypes? Is it harmful? And they're just there for a paycheck. So there's a lot more to engaging in media, so you have to just be careful.
We'll take questions in just a second. Want to see if we have any other thoughts on resources. And I did want to clarify, Sean, when you say comedy, are you talking like specifically stand-up or?
I'm thinking like, well, one of the interesting things is we have news shows that are comedy now. Like, is it John Oliver? Like, he's so educational about like the most boring bullcrap you've ever thought of. Like, oh great, the municipality of water industry. Like, I don't fucking know. Like, but it's fun and it's interesting, and I think that's really what helps people engage and really like understand things. So I think some of that is you have those sketch shows. You also have stand-up is really good. There's a lot of really good like indie comedians that you can watch that are pretty interesting and funny. I find Mateo Lane funny, but he won't stop singing, which is obnoxious. But I mean, like if you do opera, I understand. But I think that's also part of it too. Is like being open to other, you know, other people and other like ways of life. And maybe you're not going to get all the jokes. Like I don't know half the things I'm supposed to know. I'm just let it wash over you.
Do you have any other thoughts on resources, or should we start taking questions?
Let's see some questions.
All right, Viga, you had a question?
Oh, yeah. Oh, more of a statement about Black people and social media. I was really excited about the blackening. I think that's what it's called.
Yeah, the show.
Yep.
Isn't it a movie?
It might be
Yeah,
a movie.
Yeah.
Horror movie addressing like different like black tropes in horror and whatnot.
Yeah, I was so excited. I was like, finally, it's like a full cast. Like, it's going to be amazing. And I thought it was so stereotyped. Like, I was in the theater just really sad. I hate that we're dumbed down to, not dumbed down, I mean, we have our statements and things we love, but we're educated and we are naturally funny. We don't need stereotypes to be perceived as funny or intelligent or intellectual. So I'm still waiting, and Hidden Figures I know was mixed too in the help. So I'm still waiting for that Black Cast movie to come out that's like fabulous. Tyler Perry's been trying, but that's a whole nother panel. Yeah, but I'm still waiting. I think the most powerful, almost Black movie I saw was Life, and that's aging me. But and the soundtrack for it was amazing too. It was I believe it was Martin Lawrence and I think Eddie Murphy. Was that, yeah, but they were in prison trying to get out, and you know they were in prison wrongly, and it was really powerful. But it's a shame that we're in 2024 and it's still a problem.
Like I haven't seen The Blackening yet. I actually had one of my friends who's watched it and found it really funny. And this is kind of, the whole, like, fact that, not in any way a monolith. And I'm guessing the point of The Blackening was to, like, mock certain stereotypes. And which is, like, in my like, and I've made film projects when I was, like, in college, where it's just like, we're going to make fun of these stereotypes to, like, show how stupid they are. And, like, I believe the thing we use in this is like, this was so much less racist on paper for some of the things we worked on. Whereas like, going back, I would have done this a little differently. Like the intent was there, but just like, I think it also happens a lot with a lot of artists where it's like, there's a certain idea you want to kind of get across. And then looking back, it's like, I would have done that differently maybe, in that particular sense. And there is also the very difficult aspect of like, there's still that very level of like what is safe to do in Hollywood and what kind of stories. I'll probably be talking about this a lot over the weekend in just terms of like, there are so many stories, particularly in American history and dealing with like Afro-diasporic history, where it's like, there's no way to make this story and not have like people feel really, really bad. and that is something that I think I like, or some events where it's like, oh yeah, that's going to be a very difficult pill for a lot of general audience to really kind of swallow. Like, as points out, Black Panther comes out and suddenly everyone is like, after one scene, everyone's questioning how museums got all their stuff. And I was like, that was like the most minimal thing that movie could have addressed. And it's and society across the world was a bit of an upheaval. It's like there's so much more that this can really get into.
Haven't even scratched the surface.
They're just kind of glossing over here. So you want to talk about like black pirates. You want to talk about secret societies that were like spy networks during the Civil War. Like there's a lot, and I understand that Hollywood is very, very afraid.
Yeah. So
that is also it is very much a challenge. And like, have you watched any of Castlevania that's on Netflix? It's supernatural horror theme, but like the discussions of race and culture, particularly in Nocturne. One of the characters, she's from Haiti. She's like fresh from the Haitian Revolution, and her brand of magic comes from Haitian voodoo, and it is very well portrayed. She is really intelligent, very like interesting, complex. Like I love Castlevania so much. Like the characters of color in that series are fantastic. But also that whole show, in its nature, challenges a lot of just general social conventions. Like flat out just calls out various institutions as just like, oh yeah, this is the problem. This was the problem right here. So that on like a larger big screen type of thing, I can see that being challenging. But in places, it's still not there yet. It's might be 2024, but it's popping up in places. So.
Yeah, 2025 seems like it's gonna go off real quick. I love this optimism.
Let's narrow our focus so that I don't break down on stage.
Don't cry.
Minnesota's safe, right?
Any other questions? Questions about allyship, education? Yeah.
When you're sending individuals to resources, what do you do to make sure that they're not finding those not so great resources or those super biased resources?
So let me repeat the question. When you're sending folks to resources, how do you make sure that they aren't going to the wrong resources, ones that are super biased or misinforming? And my example is going to be a website written by Christians for Christians about Jews. You don't want something like that. So how do we make sure that folks are going to good resources?
I didn't have specific books or specific articles, specific news sites that cover certain things that I will actually send people to. So it's like, this is a really good description of this. And if I have time, I'll kind of give my general kind of take on like what it covers, where it's strong here, or even I can point out like where it's kind of like weak in some places. And if I'm feeling really ambitious, I might even give like, here's another example of something that kind of covers the topic, but you can really kind of see the bit of bias, or so a bit of a side-by-side comparison, because it can be very helpful at a certain level where it's just like, this is what someone who is like in this experience, how they describe something. This is very much a biased outside perspective on it, and you can kind of see these differences here and where clearly this like facts and emphasis are being skipped over, or where this is just kind of not in that person's particular take, and being able to recognize the difference between those types of like media, I think is also really important. It's very useful and very helpful, because then from that people can go forward and be all like, oh, well, this doesn't seem like it was written in good faith, whereas this I've seen that does actually kind of match what I've already experienced. So yeah.
I rabbit hole hard. So just gay stuff though. Other stuff kind of like tunnels out on the side. But I always find that like if you find like really good resources that have broad spectrum appeal, or like where a good place to go for having like this is where the resources are, this is like a pure source. Like here in Minneapolis, when I talk to people about like where can I learn stuff about like gay people or queer stuff or LGBT stuff, I'm like, dude, there's a library off of Lake Street. It's called Quatrefoil and Quatrefoil. There we go. And it's an all gay library, all queer library, and if not, like if people are just starting off, I usually point them towards documentaries like Before and After Stonewall. Those are a great generalization of like where the history's been and what's going on. Fortunately, the gay liberation movement is relatively recent, so it has a lot of like video evidence, personal like people who were there. Like you have people who were at Stonewall that you can talk to, or people who are dealing with the FBI. What the fuck did they do? The McCarthy hearings, like those were like there, and so like you can see these like direct visual references. But I feel like some of those broader documentaries, especially, are a good like point of view for people, because it's a good in, because it's not giving you too much detail about like nonsense that it might like just be too much for someone to handle, and it has too much nuance, but it gives you a broad spectrum idea of like what's going on. And if you want to like dig deeper, go for it. But like I've got a rusty shovel, so good luck.
Except to be honest with you, lavender scare, no, that's too early. And then after I think of lavender scare, I think of like, yes, that time when I was so afraid of soap.
I love the lavender mask. That's my favorite. I wish lesbians would like break into things more often.
Let's see, I've had the line from Inside stuck in my head this whole panel. The simple narrative taught in every history class is demonstrably false and pedagogically classist.
So I think that's a good question about where to point people. Normally, what I think a lot of our instincts are to be like, well, just go find a person who is that, minority status and listen to them. But then, like, say with trans people, you've got Blair White out there being just as transphobic as possible.
Caitlyn Jenner.
Yeah, don't go listen to Caitlyn Jenner. So I do try to have like specific people in those cases when I know that like the loudest voices out there are not the ones that people should be listening to. I try to direct them to specific creators that kind of suit the person who's looking for the information.
I will say, when I was working on that film project, I was like, went to my Asian friend, hey, does this seem too racist? And they were like, nah, that seems fine. I think it's hilarious. So like, getting maybe more than just your one Asian gay friend's opinion on something is like not a terrible idea.
Vibe check.
Yeah, yes. I would say I typically keep a couple of good like resource list websites on hand that branch out to different articles that have kind of been fielded by people. So I'll point out our little sheet there with the QR code and the resources. So the Racial Equity Tools resource is a good one. Again, it has a bunch of articles, it has a bunch of like glossary stuff. I've got to put it on there, but Anti-Racism Daily is one that sends an email to your inbox daily about various things. So finding a good resource list or a website that kind of specializes in that type of like topic. I think the Trevor Project is also one specifically for the queer community, and then branch up from there. And then you're picking up on like, I don't want to say like the right terminology and the right information, but then you start seeing compared to the bad stuff or the misinformation, and you're like, oh, well, wait, the more reputable sources say this, I can kind of start identifying what everyone else is saying and how that's not correct.
And from there, you've done some of the work. If you have a friend, a part of that marginalized community, that's when you ask, hey, can I check in on this with you? Mm-hmm. And then it's worth educating you. Yeah. Blue check mark back there had a question, or not check mark, hashtag.
I think you've sort of touched on this, but I'm curious, as an ally in discussions, I've generally focused on systemic, larger issues that someone might pick up on from a statistical perspective or something like that, versus relaying stories from individuals of marginalized communities. Is that probably the best strategy as an ally? And then if I wanted to have something more specific, refer to the resources that you're mentioning?
I would say it's a little bit of a mix of both. It's going to be depending on who you're talking to. There's going to be some tryhards that are going to be like, show me the stats on racism. And that's helpful. Yeah, and that's helpful, but there's a very human aspect to it, and that's when the anecdotal stuff really comes in and the personal stories. So I guess it really depends on the situation, but having both is very important. Because these are real people behind it, and we don't want to fall back on statistics and erase the stories there. So it's good to have, but definitely like start expanding your knowledge base, so then you can start touching on more like, hey, you know, these are real people that are being affected, and we can't hide behind stats because that depersonalizes it and makes people a lot more willing to drop it when shit starts hitting the fan.
Also, like, again, people do tend to respond more to an emotional connection and like having that kind of investment.
Yeah.
I also think it is okay to not be part of a particular marginalized community, but still be bothered when people are abusive to that particular community. Like, you can be white and have strong feelings about seeing racism happening and that being like, I don't like seeing these kinds of harmful terms being used, or people being abused in that way, or just having an entire history just kind of like ignored or erased. That is a personal aspect of you that you can absolutely like share. Like, it's different than like trying to co-opt like another group's like outrage or hurt, but there's also hurt that comes from seeing humans being treated poorly for whatever reason and not wanting that to happen. And I think that also has its own kind of weight and value, especially where it's just like, I think it's very easy to be all like, oh, well, I'm like, the only things I'm saying are hurting people who aren't like me, but when people who are like me also don't like this, that adds a whole other type of context. So it's like, oh, maybe I'm just an asshole. I should probably stop doing this. So I think that's something important. Like, it's like, yeah, like, you don't have to entirely distance yourself from that in order to like talk about it. It's okay to have a personal response. It's like, yeah, no, like, I don't like this racism. I don't like this misogyny. This just does not feel like the kind of community or world that I want to live in, and you should really stop doing that. That's it.
We are over time, so yeah, let's do some plugs. Start at Morgan.